There are many things that go into making a Zelda game. The story, the music, the gameplay, the world, all these and more are what make Zelda, well, Zelda. There is, however, one element of Zelda games that I want to take a look at that doesn't get too much appreciation. That element would be the file select screens. The file select screen is often an afterthought, even though it plays such an important role in a game. It shows you the last location, how many hearts you have, and your key items. Not to mention the fact that you see this menu every time you load up a game, as it invites you to pick up where you left off or start a new file entirely. Okay, I might be romanticizing this a bit. So today, I thought I'd shine a light on the often forgotten part of games and dive into the world of file select screens in the mainline and notable spin-off Zelda games. Let's start with what makes a good file select screen. First off, it has to be pleasing to look at. This screen invites you to start anew or pick up where you left off and continue your adventure. Second, it must be easy to navigate and find all the options. Messy and clunky menus can often be off-putting and give players a confusing start. Lastly, it has to have good music. Having the right song can influence the tone of your adventure. With all that being said, let's begin where it all began. Overall, I'm not the world's biggest fan of this file select screen. First off, it's pretty bland. Although, what can you really expect from a game this old? A lot of other games from this time had similar looking file select screens, so I really can't fault it for that. Navigating the menus also follows suit with the other NES titles, as you navigate with start and select, which messes with my brain rotten head. Starting a new file has you selecting the register your name option, which is confusing, and the way that you delete a file is called elimination mode, which is a little more understandable, but still not as direct. This file select screen is also guilty of the greatest sin, not having any music, which if you haven't caught on yet is very similar to other games from the time. The original Legend of Zelda gets a big D tier from me. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, I am also ranking all of these. Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link suffers from most of the same issues as the first game. The menu navigation is the same, and this file select screen is also lacking in any music. Where Zelda 2 does get a leg up, however, is in the design of the screen. While it's still very basic, I do like the framing of the screen. I also like that they included a little animated fairy as the cursor. The fairy makes the menu feel more alive. Because of this, Zelda 2's file select screen falls into low C tier. Jumping up a generation to A Link to the Past, this file select screen is leaps and bounds ahead of the NES games. This is the first file select screen to utilize background music. The track used here is The Great Fairy Fountain, which will become a staple for the rest of the series. This file select screen is also the first to let you control with the D-pad and face buttons. And yes, for you anarchists out there who like using start and select, those still work as well. This menu makes it clearer how to delete your file, and you can even copy your file. The only factor I'm not huge on is the visuals, which look like a classroom chalkboard with this ugly green stone background. All that said, A Link to the Past gets a B tier from me. In keeping with the release order, we have Link's Awakening. This takes a lot from A Link to the Past. Navigating the menu is easy, it's clear how to delete and copy, and it has background music, which Link's Awakening also gets a leg up because it's a unique track used instead of opting for the Great Fairy Fountain. The visuals are more fitting as this file select screen is on a brick background with some statues up in the corner, which I think is neat. Link's Awakening gets a high B tier. While we're here, I'll touch on Link's Awakening DX and the Switch remake. The only difference with the DX version is that it's in color, so just a place higher than the original. As for the Switch remake, it takes a more different approach. The files are placed on a blurred background of the title screen, which overlooks now excuse me for this, Tamaranch? I think that's how you say it. Your file actions are a submenu when you choose a file, and you can load and autosave. The background music is a modern remix of the track used for the original file select screen, which I enjoy a lot. While it's basic, it still gets the job done. I'll slide it into low A tier. On to quite possibly the most celebrated game in the franchise, which I happen to think is the most overrated. Ocarina of Time.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Setting my feelings for the game aside, this file select screen is in some ways an improvement from A Link to the Past, and in some ways not. As for the improvements, the background is the first to be animated. It may just be a blue sky going in a circle, but hey, it's something. The whole menu is blue, which I don't hate, I just find it basic. Another new feature is that when you click on a file, a drops down to show your hearts, rupees, and key items, which is neat. You are also able to change your settings for the first time on this screen. The background music still uses the Great Fairy Fountain, however. I give Ocarina of Time a high B, just above Link's Awakening. Let's talk about Ocarina of Time 3D real quick. This is a huge jump from the original. The top screen on the 3DS displays a spinning Link statue, while the sky behind him does the day-night cycle. It even displays the game's logo, as well as a brief description of the game. I think this is a lot more fun than the original version. The bottom screen is the fairly standard 3 files with more options after you select the file. I do, however, like the stone texturing given to the files, and it's all set on a brown stone engraved with the crest of the royal family. The Master Quest side is even more intense, with the statue of Link in a more standoffish pose, and a stormy background with a new description. The files were also given a blue recolor, which I like better than the gray. Ocarina of Time gets an S tier, if only because the Master Quest is so cool. Now for Ocarina of Time's younger brother, Majora's Mask, and wait a minute, it's literally the same thing? What? The only difference between this and Ocarina of Time is the color of the sky in the background, and the fact that there are only 2 files instead of 3, which just like, why? Now, let's be honest, who would have guessed the asset flip game would reuse as much as possible? Yeah, Majora's Mask gets a C. I'm still confused about why there are only 2 files instead of 3. We'll talk about Majora's Mask 3D too. At least the 3D version has some differences from Ocarina of Time 3D. Instead of the statue of Link spinning on the top screen, it shows all your key items. At least this has a use compared to the statue, but I still like the statue more. Another change present is when you choose a file, the submenu now contains an options button. Whoa, how exciting. I give this one a B. Back down to the Game Boy for a bit with Oracle of Ages and Season. So these games being dual releases and all also means that they share the exact same file select screen, which doesn't surprise me, but I was kind of getting my hopes up that they would be different. No matter, I think this is a nice file select screen. I'm a big fan of the menu looking like it's inside a tree, which is pretty cool. I also like that the little Link walks when a file that has been played is selected and he stops on blank ones. Hashtag the little things. The background music here is interesting too. While it sounds very similar to the track used for Link's Awakening, it's actually different, which kind of took me for a surprise. I give the Oracle games a big A tier. Next up, 4 Swords plus A Link to the Past. Now you'd think that because this is technically a remake with an added side game, that it wouldn't be very unique. Well, if you thought like me, then you will be pleasantly surprised to know that this combo pack has its very own unique file select screen. What really stuck out to me about this one is when you load into the menu, the files do a little animation, which I thought was really cool. Also, I like how the background is in like a crystal cave and how this version of the fairy fountain reflects that. I also think it's neat that they show you the stats for both games on the file, and the little animated links make it so much better. I give this one an S tier. Ah, do you smell that? The fresh breeze, the salty water, and the wet sand. No, scratch that last one. Wet sand smells really gross. That's right, mateys, it's time to talk about The Wind Waker. This file select screen is pretty unique as well. I'm a big fan of how it unravels like a treasure map. It's very on tone with the game. I love how the one piece in the background blows in the wind. This game is also the first in the series to use a day-night cycle for the background. Ocarina of Time 3D doesn't count, I just talked about it first. I'm also a fan of this game's version of the Great Fairy Fountain, as it incorporates the violin, which has an important use later in the game. The music combines with the sound of the waves crashing, making it one of the most peaceful file select screens. It's also simple to navigate. I am for sure definitely giving Wind Waker an S tier. I suppose we should talk about the Wind Waker HD while we're here, and yeah, it's pretty much an HD upscaling of the original, albeit with some tweaks. The background doesn't roll out like a map anymore, which I assume is to accommodate the controller selection before selecting your file. They also tweaked some colors and placement of options, which aren't an issue. I do like the new rendition of the fairy fountain they used. I still like the original file select screen better, so Wind Waker HD gets a high A tier. So, believe it or not, 4 Swords Adventures does something crazy with the file select screen. What Four Swords Adventure does is it takes the file select screen from the Wind Waker and makes it static, which removes all of the charm and the character from it. The Fairy Fountain version used for it is also fairly generic until you get to the how many players part of the screen when some percussion is added. Also, I think there are way too many menus to go through, which is kind of annoying. That's really all I have to say on this game. I'm gonna put this in C. It's time for the last Game Boy entry in the Zelda series, the Minish Cap. Immediately I can draw parallels to Four Swords plus A Link to the Past. It's like they mirrored it and changed the color from blue to green. I still like the Crystal Cavern aesthetic, and the Fairy Fountain theme is different and still complements the aesthetic. There's not much to say that hasn't been said before. It's good. I'll give it an A tier. Time for another big one, Twilight Princess. Twilight Princess's file select screen is fairly basic, but packed with detail. The background is a super cool temple design, and when you hover over the files, they glow with this neat pattern inside them. The version of the Fairy Fountain they used is soft and calm, and really sounds like they use real instruments for it. The menu is also simple to navigate, and I like the way the pop-up with the key items, well, pops up. This file select screen is very simple and pretty, and gets a big A from me. And while we have Twilight Princess on the brain, let's see what the HD version has for us, and they got rid of the cool temple design. What? And they got rid of the cool designs on the actual files? My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined. D tier, get this out of my sight. Hopefully the DS games will cleanse my palate and make me feel better. It's time to look at Phantom Hourglass. This one is not bad by any means. It's just bland. I like the wood background and that the files are little maps. That's about all I like for this one. The top screen just displays the game's logo, which is super boring. I could see it being cooler if they animated it in some way or made it 3D and spin, but nope. It's just the static logo. I also think that the Fairy Fountain theme used here is probably the most annoying version of it. I mean, I have the game sitting next to me while writing this, and it's already driving me nuts. I'm giving this one a C. Now I can finally turn off this music. Before we go to the next DS game, let's look at our first spin-off game, Link's Crossbow Training, or what I like to call it, shoot everything in sight. While this file select screen isn't the most groundbreaking in the world, it does do some very unique things. For instance, this is the first and only game to let you have more than 3 files. Yup, you can have up to 8 files. The menu music is also unique to this game. I will say though, I'm not a huge fan of how basic the files and background look. It's cool that you can use your Mii and see who the top players are. That's really all I have to say on this game. I'll give it a B because it's different. Alas, it is finally time for my favorite game in the franchise, Spirit Tracks. I immediately see an improvement from Phantom Hourglass here. The top screen actually has something going on. The top screen is like an ancient wall painting of a rail map. It looks very similar to the rail maps you actually get in the game. In the cutouts for where the rails are, you can see like an ocean of sparkles, which is really the best way I can describe it. The bottom screen is a little more basic, but I like how the files look somewhat like train tickets. The Fairy Fountain theme used here for this game is cool, as it sounds like it's being played with like some ancient instruments, which I think sounds really neat. Overall, there's character here, so I'll give it an A tier. Now for my least favorite of the 3D console games. Please don't hate me for this. Skyward Sword. Despite it being one of my least favorite games, Skyward Sword's file select screen is actually one of the best. The way that the files are presented on different colored bird feathers is on point tonally. I really like that the background is an aerial view of Skyloft. The borders around the screen are also very nice. The version of the Fairy Fountain that they used for this game is simply gorgeous. The way that the strings complement the harp is beautiful. Mwah! Chef's kiss. I also like how key items are shown, especially the Master Sword with the flame orbs surrounding it. Oh, so cool. If you couldn't have guessed, Skyward Sword gets a high S tier. Perhaps maybe I've treated this game too harshly. Seeing as we're here, let's get Skyward Sword HD out of the way. Everything here is almost identical to the original, except for they butchered the design of the files again. Come on, Nintendo. The old ones had so much character, and they were positioned in a way so you could actually see Skyloft. Now the files are in the center, covering the island and devoid of color. The only file that is a different color is the autosave. Honestly, I don't know why they keep butchering the character the originals with the HD versions. Skyward Sword HD gets a C tier. It's not as egregious as Twilight Princess HD, but it still upsets me. It's time to talk about some 3DS games now, starting with A Link Between Worlds. This game's file select screen is also pretty good. The title screen flows right into the file select screen, showing which of the two worlds you're in, and is super clean. And the Fairy Fountain theme doesn't even start playing until the title theme ends, which is super clean. Clean is just the word to describe this file select screen. When you hover over a file, the key items appear on the top screen as well. The only thing that I think is ugly per se is the big notice bar scrolling at the top of the top screen, which looks like it's from a live service game. I think this file select screen is great, and another game to add to the S tier. Real quick, time for a Hyrule Warriors break. I'm grouping them all here because they all lack proper file select screens. The only exception here would be Age of Calamity. And it's not even an exception, as it just has a new game or continue option, akin to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. But we'll get to those in a minute. These are all going in F tier, with Age of Calamity just going above the rest. Triforce Heroes is up next, and considering how much I like A Link Between Worlds, this one is bound to be... What? So you're telling me this game also doesn't have a file select screen? What the flip? F tier. Next. Like I alluded to while talking about Age of Calamity, Breath of the Wild lacks a traditional file select screen, opting for a continue and new game options. Now, unlike Age of Calamity, when you hit continue, you can load a save file, but this menu is super messy, filled with one manual save and a bunch of autosaves. There is also no music in the background, which for this game is expected, but still disappointing. There's nothing even cool in the background, it just freeze flames and blurs whatever is on the menu. Yeah, this gets a straight F tier. Before we talk about Tears of the Kingdom, I want to discuss the last spin-off we'll be looking at in the video, Cadence of Hyrule. This file select screen is fairly interesting. For starters, the music immediately catches your ear as it's a lo-fi-esque remix of the title theme from Ocarina of Time and Zelda's Lullaby, which is a straight bop. The background here is also quite nice, as it's a beautiful pixel art of a field, mountain, and castle. And the background even changes when you restart the game. The actual files themselves are not super special, just don't look at how many times I've died. This really goes to show what an indie studio can do. I'll give this an A tier. Now it's time to talk about Tears of the Kingdom. And yeah, Tears of the Kingdom is exactly the same as its predecessor. Everything I said about Breath of the Wild applies here, F tier. And now for the last game on this list, the newly released Echoes of Wisdom. This game takes inspiration from both Breath of the Wild and the Link's Awakening remake. And I'm not sure I quite like it. First off, there is no background music. Why? There are only 2 save files? Also why? At least the files have a cool leather texture to them. Much like Link's Awakening, the background is just the title screen with a blur. It also suffers from the autosave flood that Breath of the Wild suffers from as well. Yeah, this game gets a straight D tier for copying the wrong things from previous games, but it's saved from F for actually having a file select screen. Well, there you have it. My thoughts and tier list on file select screens in the Zelda series. Overall, I did have a blast going back and looking at each of these games and their file select screens. It was a huge nostalgia trip for some of them. Of course, I must disclose that these are my personal thoughts and opinions, and I'd love for you to share yours down in the comments below. Hopefully you all enjoyed appreciating one of the most overlooked parts of Zelda games. If you want to see more content like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like the video, and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload or live stream. Well, that's all for me for now. I've been King from Kingdom Studios, and I hope you all have a legendary rest of your day.